Availability bias is a cognitive bias that refers to the tendency to rely on information that is easily available in our memory when making judgments or decisions, rather than considering all available information. This bias can lead us to overestimate the likelihood or frequency of events that are more easily recalled simply because they are more vivid or memorable. Availability bias can also affect our perceptions of risk and probability. We may overestimate the likelihood of rare or unlikely events simply because they are more sensational or memorable. Similarly, we may underestimate the likelihood of more common events simply because they are less memorable or sensational. To mitigate the effects of availability bias, it is important to seek out diverse sources of information and consider all available evidence when making judgments or decisions. It can also be helpful to use systematic decision-making processes that take into account all relevant factors and avoid relying solely on our memory or initial impressions. A common real-life example of availability bias is people's fear of flying. Even though flying is statistically much safer than driving a car, people often perceive it as being more dangerous because they hear more about plane crashes in the news. This is because plane crashes are highly publicized and often receive extensive media coverage, making them more available in people's memory. As a result, people may overestimate the risk of flying and may choose to drive instead, even though driving is actually more dangerous. This can lead to a self-reinforcing cycle, where people become more fearful of flying because they hear about more crashes, even though flying is still statistically safer. Another example of availability bias is people's fear of crime. People may overestimate the likelihood of being a victim of crime because they hear about crime incidents more often in the news or on social media, even though the actual likelihood of being a victim of crime is relatively low. Overall, availability bias can lead to distorted perceptions of risk and can influence people's decision-making processes in subtle but significant ways.